Good afternoon. I'm Herman Morris, City Attorney for the City of Memphis. Today, we received the decision from the Court of Appeals for the state of Tennessee, sitting in Nashville, addressing the voter photo ID law and the library card issued by the City of Memphis Public Library as a means of satisfying the Tennessee voter photo ID law. We are pleased to report to the mayor and to the citizens of the City of Memphis that the court, after hearing the arguments of counsel, after reviewing the briefs and all of the research submitted by the various lawyers in the case, has determined that the City of Memphis Public Library photo ID is sufficient, adequate, and appropriate for use as identification for purposes of voting in an election in this city. And quite frankly, as we continue to read the opinion, they have recognized a similar right for municipalities all across the state of Tennessee. I want to, at this time, thank and applaud the courage of our mayor, Mayor A.C. Wharton. He took this issue on because of the importance of making sure that citizens in the city of Memphis are able to exercise their fundamental constitutionally given right to vote. He stood alone in this entire state challenging this act and advocating for a more feasible, a more accessible, and easier way to satisfy this voter ID card mandate. I am extremely proud to say that our mayor, Mayor A.C. Wharton, was right on the mark in this case. He was on the right side of the issue. He accepted the challenge and he persevered, and that he was ultimately found to be correct and successful. With that, and no further ado, it is with a great sense of pride that I present to you our mayor for this great city of Memphis, Mayor A.C. Wharton, Jr.
Thank you, Arvin, and thank you and your team. Ms. Newman, Assistant City Attorney, who was also in a leadership role, is not here, but thank her in her absence, and all of the other attorneys who worked so diligently on this. This is a great day because at a time in which we admonish and criticize and chastise folks for not voting, anything that we can do to open wider the doors to the ballot box is indeed a step in the right direction and for the right reasons. And this is why we take great joy in the court's ruling. I will say, some will say this is legislating from the bench. That's already been said. But what the court did is read the law in its entirety. What those who had opposed the library card had said is that it ran afoul of the state's responsibility to ensure the integrity of the purity of the ballot box. But that same law, I might add, states that it is designed to ensure maximum participation by all citizens. And that's what we were relying on, is not find ways to restrict participation. The policy of the state ought to be, how can we get more participation? And we felt, and still feel, and have been vindicated in our feelings, that the issuance of an ID card by a governmental agency is adequate. And it is fair and proper that the court recognize that, looking at the law in its entirety, not on a selective basis, pulling out those portions of the law with respect to security, purity, and integrity, but forgetting the fact that the state is also under a mandate to maximize, to ensure maximum participation in the electoral process. And that's precisely what this is about. Let us not also forget that the same card can now be used when you want to get your utilities turned on down at light, gas, and water. If you'll remember, just a year or so ago, a resident of this very city, I do believe it could be argued, lost his life because he did not have this kind of ID. It's also going to make it easier for our workforce investment network to get folks out for jobs, particularly those who have criminal records and don't have ID. So it is a great day, not merely from the electoral standpoint, but for so many other daily uses that can be made of this card. With that, and I also want to thank Ms. Madeline Taylor. I understand she is right here from the NAACP, and Keenan McCoy of our library. It's just a great day all around. Literacy, civic participation, and of course the electoral process. So thank you all so much for standing with us on this. Jan Hooks, Director of the Division. And so just thank you so much. We really appreciate it. But again, thanks to the lawyers, and I think I can say lawyers are pretty special people sometimes. I have no particular reason for saying that. I'll stop right there. Any questions that you might have? I'm going to have to leave that to the lawyers. I'll let the lawyers decide that. I am simply glad that the ultimate point we wanted to vindicate was that you could take this card issued by the library and use it for voting purposes. We ended up where we want to be, but I'm going to leave that question to the lawyers. By the way, I will say this. There were two approaches to this. When the requirement came down, we could have protested, tell people to stay away, or we could do as we did and try to take some step to work within the law. This is the epitome of working within the law. It shows that in a democracy that the system does work. We worked within the law. Why or how? Because we said, well, we disagree with this, but we're going to go ahead and come up with a real ID card. We think it's a real ID card working within the law, and that's precisely what we did. I'm sorry. The question was, are there a group of citizens who this decision particularly? Yes, for those who do not have driver's licenses or who've lost their ID, for those who may have had their rights restored and do not have any ID. So yes, any of those folks who don't have a birth certificate, all of those things. Some of those issues were addressed in the court's ruling. It is burdensome to go and get a birth certificate, but the court said that's not enough to declare that unconstitutional. But this helps them. They can get this card, so it does help those who don't have birth certificates, do not have driver's license. They will be helped particularly.
You talked about working within the law. What if the legislature comes back in January and passes a bill that specifically says library cards are not a
Great question. The question from Mr. Dries was, in light of my statement that we worked within the law, what if the legislature comes back in session and specifically excludes library cards, this form of ID? As we always say in the judicial system, we don't answer hypothetical questions, but we'll just have to deal with it if that situation should come up. I would hope that the opinion would be read closely and see how it fits within the law, particularly when we stop to consider that no one has shown that there was a lot of in-person fraud going on. Why would the legislature wish to go in and come up with a remedy for a problem that does not exist? But again, that's hypothetical. I can't rule that out, but we'll be prepared to deal with it. Did I get everything? How many cards have been issued?
1,908.
1,908 approaching.
That's 1,908 additional cards, not counting the little tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands that are out there already.
Right. There are already a lot of ID cards out there, but additional cards, over 1,900. Thank y'all.
Okay. Well, we're pleased to announce that the State of Tennessee Court of Appeals in Nashville determined that the City of Memphis Library photo ID is adequate, sufficient, and proper for use as voter identification when you go to vote at the polls in the upcoming election. This is an important victory for the citizens of the City of Memphis, in fact, for citizens all across the state. What the court said was that a city, an agency of the state, an entity of the state could issue an ID that would be acceptable at the polling place, so that all of those folks who don't have driver's license or who don't have photos on their driver's license, like my mom, can go and vote if they have a library card with their photo on it. Yeah. Now you have to appreciate this didn't just happen. It's the leadership of the mayor of this city, Mayor Wharton, who took on this issue when no one else across the state was challenging this statute. He took it on because he believed that nothing should stand between a voter, a citizen, and them exercising their right to vote. And putting this extra burden of having to get a photo ID was something that he would not stand still for. We had to find a way to make it more accessible, to make it easier, more convenient for the voters in the city of Memphis to get access to a photo ID that they could use so they could exercise their constitutional right. There are some 16, 18 libraries in the city of Memphis where you can get a library card photo ID that you can use on election day and cast your ballot. That's an excellent way to address the need to have a photo ID on election day. And I encourage everyone to go to the next door or nearest library, get a photo ID made there, and then turn out and go out and vote.